Thanks, everyone. As Anthony mentioned, I'm here to speak about one of our pilot projects looking at drinking water source protection, specifically in the Erne Larah catchment in Cavan. But before I go into that, I just want to give you a bit of context to the project. We developed an interim pesticide strategy which we published back in 2021. And in this, we set out our approach for progressively reducing the risk of pesticides in our drinking water sources. And we proposed to do this at the time by working in collaboration with stakeholders who shared this common goal. Within the strategy, there are three key pillars: collaboration, understanding risk, and managing risk. And this framework is in line with the new drinking water regulations and also new source protection guidelines. One of the key stakeholder groups that we work with in implementing this strategy is the National Pesticides in Drinking Water Action Group. This group is chaired by the Department of Agriculture and Food and the Marine, and the key aims are to enhance collaboration between stakeholders, to raise awareness of pesticide exceedance issues in drinking waters, and to promote best practice of pesticide use. This slide is just to give an overview of some of the other source protection projects and initiatives that we have ongoing at the moment. So the first there is the catchment focus groups that are set up by the National Pesticides in Drinking Water Action Group, and these are set up in areas where there might be more persistent issues with pesticides, and it's really to engage stakeholders at a local level, and we've got about 5 of these across the country at the moment. We were also involved in the Interreg Source to Tap cross-border project, and then as part of our drinking water safety plan approach and the implementation of the new drinking water regulations, we're developing source risk assessments and catchment action plans for each of our 700 water treatment plants. Also, through the implementation of our biodiversity action plan, we have planted over 110,000 trees across 30 of our sites, and we've done this using DAFM's Woodlands for Water and creation of woodland on public land schemes. And some of these have benefits for source protection as well. And then in April of this year, €7.5 million funding was awarded under the Peace Plus programme for a new project called Protecting Shared Waters. This project will work with landowners to pilot nature-based solutions and water conservation measures in subcatchments in the Strule and the Fane. It will be led by Northern Ireland Water, and we'll also be partnering with the Agri-Food and Biosciences Institute, the Rivers Trust, Ulster University, Ulster Wildlife, and the James Hutton Institute. And that brings me on to the Erne Larah Water Source Protection Project, which I'm going to be speaking to you in more detail about today. So this came from a commitment that we made in the second cycle River Basin Management Plan to trial management measures to reduce the risk of pesticide contaminations in our source waters. So it's an Uisce Éireann initiative, but the stakeholders of the National Pesticide and Drinking Water Action Group have been instrumental in shaping and steering the project over the last number of years. Back in 2020, when the project scoping was underway, there were 36 public water supplies with exceedances of pesticides nationally. It's important to point out that exceedance of pesticide in drinking waters in Ireland aren't at levels that would pose a public health risk. But at the time, a pesticide called MCPA was of particular concern because it accounted for 58% of the pesticide exceedances nationally. It's a selective herbicide designed to kill weeds whilst protecting crops, and it's commonly used for treating rush infestations. MCPA is highly soluble. It has a low affinity towards organic sediments. It can remain in soil for some time, and it's persistent in water. This is just to give you an overview of where we are in terms of the timeline of the project. So it initially began in 2019. It officially launched in our pilot catchment in 2023. Last year, we were able to implement most of the measures on the ground, and we have a little bit to finish off this year, and then we'll be doing our preliminary project evaluation. This map just shows the catchments where there were pesticide exceedances across the country when we were set out about selecting our pilot study area. So we selected the Belturbet water treatment plant catchment, and it abstracts water from the River Erne. And we chose this catchment for a few reasons. It had quite frequent exceedances of the pesticide MCPA, but also it was a good representation of other catchments with similar issues, both in terms of it being grassland dominated with poorly draining soils. The catchment itself was too large to undertake a pilot study, so we selected a subcatchment within the Éireann called the Larah, which was a much more manageable area of just 56 kilometres squared. We also have an abstraction within this subcatchment, so it was beneficial from that point of view. That's just where the subcatchment is located there. So the project is a voluntary project, and we got 35 farmers to sign up within the study area. And here we can see the measures that we have delivered as part of the project. To decide what measures to include in the project, we initially undertook a survey of the farmers in the catchment to see what the particular issues were. So all farmers received a free water and environmental management plan and free support and advice from our agricultural advisor. All farms that needed them received a pesticide storage unit, spill kit, and drip tray. In terms of grassland management, 14 farms received mulching and a weed wiping service. 15 farms received stock-proof fencing and alternative drinking water points. And we also held a training event in the catchment to demonstrate riparian buffers and proper sprayer use. And I've just got some pictures of some of the measures that we installed. I'm just going to sip. So in terms of grassland management, this is a picture of a before and after of mulching that we undertook on a particular farm. So mulching can help suppress rushes by weakening the plant over time and stopping the spread of the seeds. We intend to do another round of mulching this year, followed by weed wiping. And weed wiping is a targeted way of applying pesticides directly to the rushes rather than spraying. It also uses glyphosate instead of MCPA, which is a lower risk to water compared with MCPA. Here are some examples of the fencing of watercourses and the alternative drinking water points that we provided. We provided both solar-powered troughs and pasture pumps, depending on the particular needs on a farm. And where there were opportunities, we fenced off greater areas of the watercourse. And in this example, you can see the old fence line and then where we installed the new fence line. And in this example, we created a targeted buffer zone where we intercepted an overland flow pathway. We also planted native trees in this plot, which acts as an additional buffer and helps to limit the runoff whilst also enhancing biodiversity. I was interested to listen to Max's talk this morning because I'm going to talk a little bit as well about how do we measure the effectiveness of these measures. It can be quite tricky when you're trying to distinguish what change you're making as part of delivering a project versus what are results of other external influences, such as changes in rainfall and flow. So we therefore use a weight of evidence approach, and we monitor outputs as well as outcomes. So when we're talking about outputs, it's what are the actions that we've delivered, so the advice and support, the training, and the measures. And then outcomes, or the impact, we monitor the quantitative water quality results as well as the more qualitative changes in attitude and behaviour. So we set up a water quality monitoring programme to enable us to measure the change of NCPA concentrations as part of the project. We monitored weekly or bi-weekly during the spraying season. And as well as MCPA, we also monitored for other pesticides including 2,4-D and mecoprop, fluroxypyr and trioclopyr, and suspended sediment, turbidity and colour, which were also particular issues in this source water catchment. We monitored in a control catchment called the Bonneau, which I don't know if you can see, it's kind of the orange subcatchment to the north there. And this catchment was chosen because it's a similar size to our study catchment, similar permeability, average rainfall, and land cover. And we knew that monitoring just the concentrations of MCPA alone wouldn't be enough to help us to measure the change. So we installed temporary flow gauges at the outlets of each of these catchments so that we could use the flow data to calculate MCPA loads. Excuse me. So we've got lots of graphs and data that we've generated as part of this project, but I just thought I'd pick out one which summarises what we're seeing in terms of change today. So this graph shows the MCPA load in grams, and you can see it's starting to come down in the Larah catchment. Probably not a significant change, only a slight reduction. But it does coincide with the work that we have been doing in the catchment in 2023 and 2024. But when we plot the MCPA loads in the Bonneau catchment, you can see there has actually been an increase in 2024. So perhaps we can say that we're having a favourable impact in the Larah catchment. So we recently undertook a survey of the participants to help us understand if there had been any changes in attitudes or practices. And what we did learn, clicking around too much. What we did learn from the survey was that following the completion of the water and environmental management plans, 70% of the participants said that they have changed the way that they use pesticides. 59% said that they were likely or very likely to reduce or stop using pesticides. But however, given the nature of the land in this particular catchment, there is an understanding that many of the farmers there won't be able to stop using pesticides altogether. The participants also showed an improvement in the knowledge of pesticide use and handling, and I just got a couple of examples here. So in the 2022 survey, 54% of participants left a 5-metre buffer between the sprayed area and unsprayed area against a watercourse, and that increased to 88% in 2024. And also, the majority of participants now know that the sprayers should be rinsed in the field rather than on the farmyard. So again, it's probably too early to say, but I'd say between the water quality monitoring data and our survey, we can say that we're likely having a positive improvement on best practices of pesticide use in the catchment. and hopefully reducing the risk of pesticides entering our source waters. So just reflecting on what we've learned so far, time is really important. We need sufficient time to ramp up a project, implement the measures, and then assess the effectiveness of them. In terms of delivery of measures, what was required to be undertaken in the catchment, probably we didn't estimate the costs and the scope of what was required initially. So we had to use a risk-based approach to prioritise where we put the measures in, so we got the best outcomes. There was also logistical challenges, finding local contractors to do weed wiping, because it's not actually common practice in that area of the country, and this also caused us some delays. And lastly, in terms of engagement, I would say reaching the right stakeholders in a voluntary initiative can be challenging, because it primarily attracts people who are already trying to do the right thing. But we do believe that direct engagement with the agricultural advisor and the farmer is one of the most valuable tools in influencing behaviour. So this year we'll be finishing off the project and aiming to highlight the key learnings that could potentially be rolled out as part of a wider programme, and also what findings we could use to perhaps influence policy. We intend to do more source protection projects of this nature in the future and look to tackle other source water quality challenges in addition to pesticides. And I'd just like to finish off by saying thanks to all the participants that have been involved in the project for all their hard work, and to the National Pesticides and Drinking Water Action Group for their support, and also to the project team, which you can see there. And my contact is catchments@water.ie if you've got any questions. Thanks.